Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams. Welcome into another week of Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews, where we share our thoughts on the top games from the weekend from kind of a gambling perspective here, taking a look at those point spreads. And, I don't know if you're making any kind of plays on the basis of what we say on this program. Well, there is one person indeed, if you're going to follow his advice. The advice you want to follow is our buddy Dari Payro. Of course, you know him from R.S. Andrews, and, of course, you know all about R.S. Andrews. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. They take good care of you, whether it be an issue with your water heater, your air conditioner, or anything like that. rsandrews.com to find out more information about that. And, Dari, I got to say, if you know as much about those systems and houses, air conditioning and everything else as you know about picking games, folks are going to be in good shape with R.S. Andrews because you had quite a week when it comes to handicapping last week. Obviously, I have no idea what this feels like, so I have to ask you, what's it like to be as hot as you were last weekend?
Oh, it feels good. 7-1 is just crushing it. So pretty happy with how everything played out.
Yeah, let me tell you something. I'm the exact opposite of that right now. And with that in mind, before we kind of get moving here, we're going to talk about Georgia a little bit here too. But before we kind of get moving on any of that, can we check the tote board here for a second, take a look at where things stand? I had a disastrous week, and as much as I'd love to be happy for my friend Dari, there's a part of me that can only think about myself here on this. I go 3-6. I'm now 13-21 on the year. I will say it's as hard to be 21-13 as it is to be 13-21. Like, you couldn't pick that many losers if you tried. I am in awful, awful shape right now. I got blistered by a bunch of bad teams last week. I got to stop picking these bad teams because it is working out terribly. Connor a little better. What are you, 16-18 on the year for Connor Riley? And, of course, a red-hot Dari Payro. Connor actually joins us here for a second.
Yeah, I thought I was doing pretty great, feeling confident and comfortable going 6-3, and then I come in and see Dari 8-1, and I actually lose ground here, and I'm just,
Yeah, I mean, and Dari, in all seriousness, if you gain ground in a competition over someone that has a 6-3 week, like, that alone's a pretty good job right there.
Oh, yeah, that's crushing it.
Yeah, it really is. And whatever y'all know, you and Connor both, I guess I'm going to need some advice because, like I said, last week I got beat up pretty good overall. All right, so we're going to pick a lot of the games for this upcoming weekend and have some fun with that. And the way the format works, if you're just joining us for the first time, is, we typically have kind of a cadre of DawgNation experts weighing in with their thoughts. Our buddy Mike Griffith will weigh in today from Athens. Connor will share his thoughts. I'll share my thoughts. That develops our consensus of the pick, and then Dari Payro gets his chance to decide if he wants to go with the flow. That's when we call the show Go With The Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews. Before, though, we pick the games of the weekend, let me talk a little bit about Georgia, who obviously does not play this Saturday, but from a gambling perspective, 4 games into the season, 1/3 of the way through the regular season. I thought it might be kind of interesting to look to see what some of the preseason prognostications about Georgia were, what some of the current betting odds on Georgia from a future standpoint are, and let's just talk for a moment about how we feel about these in comparison to maybe what we would have been saying, or maybe some of you actually getting some action down on this before the year began. So let me give you kind of a recap of, in some cases, these are current odds, in some cases, these are preseason odds, but here's kind of the picture for Georgia right now. Currently, to win the national championship, they are at 5-1. Depending on where you shop this around, you may see this as high as 8-1, but it is 5-1 at least according to a Vegas Insider, which I was checking today. Before the season, the question, yes or no, does Georgia make the playoff? The yes bet was plus 135, which means you'd have to bet $135 to win back $100. The no bet was 165, which means if you bet $1, you get $1.65 back on that. The early, before the season began, over-under was at 11. Jake Fromm's current Heisman odds sit at 40-1 after the Notre Dame game on Saturday, and DeAndre Swift sits at 80-1 to win the Heisman Trophy after the game against the Fighting Irish this past Saturday. So, Dari, let me start with you here, and this is not an official pick. This is just us kind of kicking this around. If you had a bet down on Georgia to win the national championship at whatever odds, whether it be 5-1 now or maybe the more commonly found 8-1, you may have even found this a little higher than that before the start of the season, although I think 8-1 was pretty prevalent there for a while. You feel better or worse about a national championship bet on Georgia after seeing them play 4 times?
I mean, I feel good about it. I'm in at 7-1 earlier this summer. I like what I see from the wide receivers with Dom starting to get more playing time. It looks like he's coming along nicely, and I'd like to see Pickens get a little more involved. So far, so good.
So, Connor, I will say in response to what Dari says there, I like the yes playoff bet for Georgia right now a lot more than I like the national championship overall. And it's not because, I've necessarily lost faith in Georgia. I think a national championship pick is just a tough thing to make a bet on anyway. But given the fact that Georgia played a top 10 team and won that game, that was one of the big preseason hurdles for Georgia anyway, even though most of us didn't think Notre Dame would keep it close. Dari did. He correctly called that game a week ago. But Georgia passed that test, so a yes bet on the playoff, just being one of the Final Four as opposed to the one team standing, that would be a bet I'd feel a lot better on. Right, I'd feel better about that bet right now than I would the national championship pick overall.
Right. The thing you have to look at here from getting the playoff, Georgia, wins the East, and they win the SEC title game, given how stacked the SEC is this year. They're going to be in the playoffs, so you kind of have to, and you're getting plus odds there anyway. I feel like you kind of have to take that. You have it. And I don't love the 5-1 odds. I believe they were 8-1.
Yeah.
I like those a little bit better. Obviously, there's more value there. But if you think they're going to a national championship team, you obviously also hammer down on that. Will they make the playoff bet? Because that's just smart betting.
Dari, along those same lines, the over/under of 11. I did pick Georgia to go 12-0 in the regular season. I guess that might be a bet I'd hedge a little bit right now. Some of the teams that Georgia plays maybe look worse than they would have on paper. A&M's an example of that. Auburn, which I already thought was a tough game for Georgia, maybe they look a little better. Georgia did play a close game on Saturday, which kind of colors your opinion a little bit right now. I'm not saying I would drastically change my opinion on this, but I might hedge a little bit about going 12-0 and say that right now the under on those, or at least a push, I don't think Georgia loses twice, but a push probably looks a little better, or if you had to choose one or the other, an under over the 12-0. I might hedge a little bit on Georgia undefeated on the basis of what I've seen for 4 games. How about you?
Yeah. Do we get extra odds on a push bet?
I was more saying the juice on this was on the under to begin with, and I'm not saying I'd pick them to push. I'm just saying going 12-0 seems it seems a little a bit of a tougher row to hoe now that I've seen not just Georgia for 4 games, but some of the teams that Georgia will be playing.
Sure, I would agree with that. I mean, they're gonna come into a tough stretch in November, and that's where they'll cut their teeth, and we'll get a really good picture on how well Georgia is as a complete team.
And Connor, you actually picked Georgia to go 11-1 in the regular season. Do you see anything through 4 games that makes you fearful that they will now go 12-0? Would you hedge towards the undefeated regular season based on 4 games?
No, I still feel pretty comfortable with my push. I did say that Missouri was going to be that game. I don't think that anymore. I think it's going to be Auburn if Georgia is to lose a game. But if you forced me to make a decision between 12-0 or 10-2, I actually go 12-0.
Okay, that's interesting to hear. And Dari, before we get on to this week's picks, let me just say one more thing here. I mentioned before that Fromm's 40-1 to win the Heisman, Swift's 80-1 to win the Heisman. I believe if I was sitting in a Vegas sports book right now, or if I was sitting in front of an online screen right now, if I was going to do a $10 bet on Georgia win the national championship, I might actually split that up and just put 5 on Fromm to win the Heisman at way better odds. Swift, $5 on him to win the Heisman, also at way better odds. You got to think if Georgia is playing for a national championship, winning a national championship, one of these guys is probably leading the way, at least putting himself in consideration for a trip to New York City. I think it's a lot more fun right now, a lot better odds. If you believe Georgia's going to win the national championship, wouldn't you ride Fromm or Swift as a Heisman guy right now just because you get the odds for it? Now, Georgia could win the national championship, one of these guys not win the Heisman. But based on the difference in price, I believe that's probably the direction that I would go.
I wouldn't put any money on Fromm win the Heisman just because he doesn't get enough volume. He's not going to get enough of the stats, the yardage, the touchdown. Wins are good, and being part of the team in contention is great. but I just don't see him in that category when you have offenses like Oklahoma that are just that producing machines.
Connor, you got a thought on that? Sorry, Dari. Finish your point. I'm sorry. Finish your point.
Yeah. I mean that's just that, and then Swift would be better if he can get some more touches. I think that would be a better bet, just because they run the ball, but they definitely need to feed him more.
Connor, what do you think?
So I actually kind of really am interested by that Swift at 80-1 odds there. Last week, career high 18 carries. The other three Georgia running backs, Brian Herrien, James Cook, and Zamir White, guys who we thought we could see in that game. Only 9 carries there. Kirby Smart, has spoken effusively about Swift this week. And I think, in bigger games, they're going to want to maybe be a little bit more reliant on him and feed him and give him the ball in, various different ways. I believe he had touches on 21 of Georgia's 59 plays there. So I think in bigger games, the games against Auburn, an SEC championship type game, games against A&M and Florida in November as well, I think he might actually get the touches. And if he plays like we think he can play, I kind of think there's a good chance that if Georgia, wins the SEC, there's a realistic case to be made that he could be your Heisman Trophy winner.
It's our R.S. Andrews Go with the Flow. It's brought to you by our friends at R.S. Andrews. And by the way, this time of year, this week, it's been 100 degrees again. That means if you go home at night after a long day at work, and if your house is not cool like it's supposed to be, that means you need to get that tune-up they provide there. It'll get your system back to factory fresh specs. They'll show up on time. They'll take good care of you. And you know what? You'll be like me at night when you tuck those covers over your shoulders and you get that cold air hitting you in the face. I couldn't sleep if I didn't have that going on. If you're the same way, you got to check out our friends at R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com. With all that said, let's dive into our picks. Games for the weekend, kind of a mediocre crop of games overall, but potentially money to be made if you are on the right side of one of these. Let me start SEC West. One of the worst teams in the country, regardless of league, regardless of classification, is the Arkansas Razorbacks. They get a struggling Texas A&M team in Dallas, Jerry World. They've played this game on a neutral site now for a number of years. Some of these have been close before. This one not expected to be. Aggies and Razorbacks. Mike Griffith, start us off. What do you think happens here?
Arkansas gasping for air. They just lost to San Jose State. They're going to get absolutely dominated and drilled by Texas A&M. I got the Aggies winning this game 37-10.
All right, so Mike Griffith weighs in on the side of the A&M Aggies here on this one. Obviously not a believer in Arkansas at all. No Jeff Sintel for us this week. Jeff is on assignment, as they say. That means to keep the flow going, we're going to also give our DawgNation Daily listeners and viewers the week off. We'll bring them back in for their pick next week. So that means I go to Connor Riley here. Connor, you hear Mike's logic on picking Texas A&M. Where do you come down on this game?
Arkansas just absolutely stinks.
Yeah.
They're just brutal. Maybe you think they rally around this week after a bad loss and an A&M team that might be pretty beat up after a physical game against Auburn. But I think this A&M team is going to be mad. And, other than playing Clemson and Auburn, they've blown out inferior competition this year. But give me the Aggies here because just Arkansas is just too bad. I don't even care how many points you're giving me here.
Yeah, I almost 100% agree with your entire piece of analysis there, and I joked about this off the top of the show. I took Arkansas a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I've taken some really ugly losses with some really bad teams. I'm not going to be dumb enough to do that this time. I think A&M needs to beat up on somebody to make Aggies fans feel a little bit better. They've certainly done that against Arkansas. They've won 7 straight up against Arkansas. They've also gone 4-1 against the spread in their last 5. Last week, obviously, being an example of the opposite on that. They are only 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 SEC games, but at this point in time, Arkansas is not really an SEC opponent. This is 23.5. I could see it being 40. I just think that I think that A&M needs to beat up on somebody, and I think Arkansas, unfortunately, is the team that's going to be on the receiving end of that. I think the quit factor could be high here with the Razorbacks. Chad Morris almost certainly going to get fired. Dari, it's a 3-0 sweep. Maybe a sucker play because it's a lot of points. Everybody likes Texas A&M. You're red hot right now. Do you want to go with the flow here?
I'm going with the flow. I think Texas A&M is going to be out to prove a point this week. They're going to try to run up the score. They're playing in Jerry's World, the fast track. I think it helps at Texas A&M speed. I think they definitely cover.
Hey, quick question here. One of the things that we do is we obviously pick the SEC games because that's what our audience cares about, the big national games as well. Do you like this game enough with a big number to pick it if we weren't going to force you to? If you were shopping around the entire board right now, do you like this one enough for that?
I do.
Okay. All right. Good to hear. Good to hear. How about Ole Miss going to Alabama? Another huge point spread. That's going to be a little bit of a theme for a lot of these games this weekend. Obviously, we all remember Ole Miss winning in Tuscaloosa back in 2015 after having won in Oxford the year before that. That was a long time ago, though. Mike Griffith, what do you say about the Rebels and the Crimson Tide?
Ole Miss visits Alabama. Ole Miss coming off a tough loss to Cal at home, and now they've got to go to Tuscaloosa. I like the Crimson Tide to win this game 42-13.
So a little closer than the experts think for Mike Griffith, taking the Rebels plus the points here against Alabama. It is a huge number, and that extra half point might even come into play on this one a little bit. Connor, are you going to go with Mike on the side of the underdog here? I think we lost your mic there for a minute. Let's see if we can get you back up and running again like we had you.
Do you know who Chase Garbers is?
Remind me.
He's the quarterback of Cal, so you clearly have not heard of him.
No.
Do you know how many yards he threw for against the Ole Miss defense last week?
How many?
357.
Yeah.
4 touchdowns against that Ole Miss defense. And that Cal team was playing at noon local time, I believe. You stumped hard for Ole Miss there.
I also got jobbed by crooked refs, and I will take that to my grave. Dari, I don't know if you saw this or not, but the officiating was awful in that game, and I think that the Pac-12 owes me personally an apology, maybe Ole Miss there as well, but continue to make your case for Cal.
Having laid all that out, I honestly think if Tua Tagovailoa and Alabama wanted to, they could get to 1,000 passing yards in this game. Ole Miss's defense made some adjustments in that game. Mike McIntyre, ooh, that's the name.
Yeah.
Is a good defensive coach. He's not going to be able to slow down those Alabama receivers. I know it's a huge number. I know that half point is going to, maybe come into play at the end. Give me Alabama here. Ole Miss just cannot hang with this team.
Ole Miss 1-9 its last 10 against the spread, 0-5 against the spread in its last 5 on the road. Dari, this for me is as simple as this. Now, you can joke if you want. I do think that there was some really weird officiating near the end of this game. I guess John Rice Plumlee gives a little bit of an emotional lift to Ole Miss. He certainly did last Saturday. Maybe if he were to play again on this upcoming weekend. The problem here is when you lose a game like that at home, where you thought maybe you were doing something late, you have to go to this house of horrors, which is what Bryant-Denny Stadium is right now. Once again, this is going to be a theme for me this week. I think the quit factor is high here. I don't think Ole Miss is a very good team, and I just think that this is a stadium they don't want to be in. Now, if this was I could pick any game on the board, I'm honestly probably not going to rush to take a team that's favored by 35.5 points. But in a situation like this where we need to pick the game, I think Alabama's the right side here. It's 2-1 Crimson Tide in favor of Ole Miss. You're going to go with the flow with us on the side of the Tide.
Going with the flow.
Okay.
Rule number 1, don't bet against Bama.
That is a rule that's worked out for you before, so we will keep that in mind. And, Vegas is certainly trying to entice you to go the other direction there at 35.5. But I think that Dari's probably on the right side on this one. Do not go against them. They just score so many points right now. Next game, I'm admittedly a lot more excited about, especially given what happened last Saturday, both these teams finding wins. Mississippi State goes to Jordan-Hare Stadium, a stadium that the Bulldogs have played well before. A lot of backstory between these two teams. Division rivals that typically play early in the year. Honestly, I know I'm an SEC homer. This is a game I actually really, really like. Mike Griffith, what do you think happens here?
Mississippi State is at Auburn in what could be a battle of freshman quarterbacks. We've seen a lot out of the young Knicks so far. I think we'll see more, just enough to get by Mississippi State in a game that goes 4 quarters, 27-20 Auburn in Jordan-Hare Stadium.
So Mike, looking at Mississippi State, keeping it closer than the experts think. He's got that one underneath the 11 right now. Connor Riley, do you agree with Mike? Are you taking the Dogs as a dog?
I'm going to be in Auburn on Friday. I might be there for the game on Saturday.
Look at you.
I really want to pick Mississippi State here. I really do. I like that. 11 points is a lot. Auburn coming off a road game against A&M. You wonder if they might be smelling the britches a little too much. but give me Auburn. I just don't know about which Mississippi State team we're going to see this week. Is it the team that pretty thoroughly dominated Kentucky?
Yeah.
Or is it the team that, blew a lead to Kansas State? Give me the sure thing in Auburn. I know what they're going to be. They're going to struggle to throw the ball with Bo Nix. They're going to run the ball a lot. They're going to control the line of scrimmage. Because of that, give me Auburn and the points here.
Yeah, the number kind of favors Mississippi State a little bit. They are 5-2 in their last 7 against Auburn against the spread. A lot of that was done by Dan Mullen. You can say what you will. Mullen did have a little bit of a history at Mississippi State of keeping games closer than they were maybe supposed to. Dari, one of the few games I got right last week was Mississippi State against Kentucky. For me, though, that pick was more of a stand against Kentucky than it was any kind of stand in favor of Mississippi State. Flat out, I don't think Mississippi State's a very good team. And I think that Auburn is an imperfect team, but I don't think Mississippi State's good enough to exploit some of the things that maybe Auburn does not quite do well. I think Auburn's still trying to figure out its quarterback right now. I think you can withstand that, though, against this Bulldogs team that I just don't know they move the football against a very good Auburn defense right now. And this defense is a good one for the Tigers. I don't think 11 even sounds like all that many points to me at the moment. I think Auburn wins this game by a couple touchdowns. I like them to go and handle Mississippi State easily, which puts the flow on the side of Auburn. Do you want to go with the flow?
I'm going to go with the flow and take Auburn. Not super confident in this. This is sort of a trap game for the Tigers. They're coming off the big win against A&M, and next week they have a road trip at Florida. But this is their only home game in 5 weeks. So I'll take Auburn at home, but they may be looking forward, trying to gear up for that Florida game.
Can I ask you a serious question about something for a moment? You have gone with me on every pick thus far. Now, as you know, based on the numbers that I showed you before, I couldn't pick a winner in an apple picking contest right now, bobbing for apples contest. Does that concern you at all that you right now are resting what is a very hot streak for you on the same games that I am for this upcoming Saturday? It makes me feel great because like I said, you've been the side to be on. But does it concern you that thus far we've been on the same side, I believe, on every game thus far?
Yeah, no, a broken clock works twice a day. So, you're eventually going to choose the same teams throughout the year.
There you go. That's not too bad. How about Kentucky at South Carolina? Admittedly, I'm also probably a little excited about this game, although for slightly different reasons. I don't think this is a bad game. Earlier in the week, this was at 2.5. I mostly see 3s out there now, which, as many of you know, is a very, very different point spread. So looks like there's a little action here on the side of the Gamecocks on this one. Mike Griffith, though, what do you think happens here?
Kentucky goes to South Carolina, a couple programs trying to stay on the rails. One's going to go off the tracks. Clickety-clack. Kentucky over South Carolina, 24-23.
So Mike Griffith actually calling for the outright upset. He's taking the Wildcats over the Gamecocks on the field. How about that for Mike? I'm actually kind of proud of him for putting himself out there like that. Connor Riley, what do you think?
Both these teams are playing backup quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Both these teams are coming in. They've lost a couple games, tough luck losers against better competition. However, as I said a few weeks ago with this one of these teams, sometimes in life, just the matter guy wins.
Mm-hmm.
Muschamp needs this game a lot more than Mark Stoops does. I believe they've lost 5 straight games to Kentucky.
They have.
If Muschamp wants to stick around for 2020 and see year 2 of Ryan Helinski, who I think is going to be a pretty good quarterback, he needs to win this game, and because of that sense of urgency, both around Muschamp and this program, this game is at home. It's 2.5. I might put some money on this. Give me South Carolina if you can find it at 2.5.
Yeah. Y'all shop that one around. Be real careful if you want to get in on that, because 2.5 was there early, but I don't know that you find that now. However, as Connor said, there's a lot at stake for South Carolina here. 5-0 straight up. The last 5 are the Wildcats against the Gamecocks. They've covered the spread in the last 6. Kentucky's also 5-1 against the spread in its last 6. You may remember they held on to a minor spread cover against Florida. Of course, did not cover last week against Mississippi State. 4-1 against the spread on the road in their last 5 versus South Carolina. So they have dominated the Gamecocks, Muschamp in particular. But in this case, I do think that South Carolina is the better team. They get the benefit of playing at home. I like Helinski as a quarterback. Now, last week, I got really punished for taking South Carolina on the road at Missouri. But you know what? I'm going to come right back to them again. I don't know how many more times the rest of the season I'll take the Gamecocks, but I don't mind taking them here, even at -3. I don't love it at 3, but even at 3, if it's one side or the other, I think the South Carolina is the right side here. I will take the Gamecocks, and by a 2-1 margin, they represent the flow. Dari, do you want to go with the flow?
I am not.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to take Kentucky. Kentucky's going to rebound after last week's loss to State. You know, they lost such a physical game to Florida, then got worked over by State. I think they enjoy a comfortable win. I like Kentucky not only to cover, but to win on the road by a pretty good amount. Money line.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. If you end up being right about that, then y'all can go shopping for whatever recruits South Carolina has for the 2020 class, transfer portal guys in the current team. You want to start looking for assistant coaches on Muschamps' roster. I mean, you're talking about just pillaging the South Carolina program. It will be on. I mean, the media will be all over them there. But Dari does not hesitate with his pick. That's why we like doing these picks with him as a part of Go With The Flow, presented by our friends at R.S. Andrews. And I said before, you know, R.S. Andrews has had its motto for a long time. They like to deliver smiles. And, you know, every person they do business with is left with a story. And you hear a lot of those stories of, you know, so-and-so came to my house and it was either a good experience or a bad experience. But at R.S. Andrews, the customer review is the smile that you see on the faces of the people that choose to reach out to them to help with a plumbing issue or an electrical issue. Or as I said before, and I'm being serious about this, but as hot as it is right now, the air conditioning is still a very big thing. They can deliver a smile for you as well, but you got to check them out online at rsandrews.com. Next game, a team that we are now all quite familiar with, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And I've got actually a pretty interesting number on Notre Dame that I'll give you in a moment. But first, they are opening 11.5. I think you're going to see mostly 12.5 now, hosting Virginia on Saturday. Mike Griffith, let's let you lead us off. Your thoughts on the Irish and the Wahoos.
Virginia at Notre Dame. How real are the Irish? Are they a legitimate top 10 team? I'm a believer. I got the Notre Dame win. Notre Dame Fighting Irish beating Virginia 38-24 at home.
Yeah, so he takes Notre Dame there to cover that number relatively easy. Connor Riley, you agree with him? We were all, I think, seemingly impressed with what Notre Dame did last Saturday. They fought Georgia, really hard. Does that carry over for this week against Virginia?
This is my favorite game on the board this week.
Good
I
to
love
hear.
this. This is my stone cold lead pipe lock of the century of the week. Give me Virginia. Notre Dame coming off a physical game. Brian Kelly said that was the most physical game he's ever played in, ever coached in. We know about the body blow theory. We've seen it with Alabama. I think we're going to start seeing it with Georgia as well. Virginia's a tough team. Bronco Mendenhall teams want to play tough, want to play physical. Virginia's got a capable quarterback and Bryce Perkins there. Notre Dame, if they think they're just going to waltz in and beat Virginia, they're not. They're going to have to earn this win. I love that this is a double-digit line. I think Virginia could win outright here if Notre Dame doesn't take them seriously. Give me Virginia in the points here. I still think Notre Dame wins, but I think Virginia keeps it real close.
Yeah, Connor and I spent too much time together during the week because I like Virginia for virtually all the same reasons. I just think this is probably a game that Notre Dame somehow finds a way to win. Home field probably matters here. But I like Virginia for virtually every single reason. We have seen it'd be tough to play the week after playing a physical team. And I think that Georgia, to its credit, is a physical team right now. When it comes to being a double-digit favorite between 10 and 14 points, which is what Notre Dame finds itself on Saturday, Irish are 2-3 against the spread in those spots under Brian Kelly when playing at home. How about this, though? If you want to know why people hate Notre Dame, this is it. They do have an outright loss, by the way, in that same span, when favored by between 10 and 13 points under Kelly. But since 1999, when playing at home as a 10 to 13 point favorite, Notre Dame is just 3-11 against the spread. Let me tell you what's worse than that. And I'm sorry, this is where a lot of the Notre Dame hatred comes from. Over that span, when favored by double digits, they're just 9-5 straight up. They've lost 5 times at home as a double-digit favorite dating back to 1999. That, for me, is not a good stat. Now, that's not the reason I'm not taking them here. It's really more about the week after having played Georgia. Boy, there's a lot of love for Notre Dame, as much as you can get coming off a loss. I think it's tough to read those press clippings. I think Virginia gives them a scare. I'm with Connor on this one, and that puts the flow on the side of the Cavaliers. Dari, I'm actually very curious to hear your pick on this. Do you want to go with the flow?
I'm going with the flow.
All right.
I like Virginia in this spot. Notre Dame's coming off a big game, emotional. They have a lot of injuries. Oh, wait. No, they take injuries. They don't have a lot of injuries. But emotionally, they are going to be spent. Emotionally, they're going to be spent. I think it's just a kind of tough spot for them to be into. Virginia's not anything really outstanding. I mean, last week they were down 17-0 to Old Dominion.
Right.
But they were able to battle back. I just think they're going to do enough to keep this game under 10.
And that's probably a better than you think ODU team. We've seen them beat Virginia Tech before, so that's not, maybe the worst lower-level opponent you can play, but I'm with you. This, for me, is more about the Notre Dame side than it is the Virginia side. I think Virginia's probably just close enough, good enough to keep it close. I love your reasoning on that, Dari. I think that's a really good pick. Let's keep the national games going here for a little bit. Let's go out west. I don't know how many Pac-12 games we've done this season, but I think this one's a pretty good one. USC, after getting a great win last Friday against Utah, they're in the Coliseum. They go up to Seattle to take on the Washington Huskies. This one's kind of parked itself at 10 for most of the week. The Huskies a 10-point favorite here. Pretty fun game. Mike Griffith, what do you think about this Pac-12 showdown?
Southern Cal at Washington. Southern Cal with a really big win last week, but I think the Huskies have found themselves. I'm going to take Washington to beat USC 31-27.
So he goes USC to keep it close here against Washington. Connor Jacob Eason, obviously on the side of the Huskies. Injury situation again for USC at quarterback. They've had a lot of that this season. How does that impact what you're thinking about this game?
USC playing a third-string quarterback here. So if you look at their first two big Pac-12 wins against Stanford, against Utah, both those games were at home. Mm-hmm. Stanford and Utah, they're traditionally more seen as a physical team, and you can out-athlete them and outbeat them. That's not going to be the case with this Washington team. They're going to be able to hold up in coverage against USC's three very good wide receivers. I don't think USC is going to be able to run the ball well enough to win this game. And I know the transitive property doesn't mean everything in college football. USC lost to BYU. Washington whipped up on BYU a week ago. Jacob Eason looked fantastic. It's the best he's ever played. I think he rides high. I think he continues that momentum. No 10 points is a lot. Give me Washington here.
I didn't realize that USC in recent years had played as well as it had against Washington. 5-1 straight up in the last 6. Just 3-7 in their last 10, though, against the spread when it comes to the Huskies. However, over the last 19, the situation for the Trojans has not been good. 6-13 in their last 19 against the spread. 2-5 in their last 7 road games against the spread. It's very, last week we saw Clay Helton win a game against a coach that almost everybody in America thinks is better than him. Whittingham is thought of as a good game coach. Clay Helton's on the hot seat. I don't think that magic works 2 weeks in a row, though. As Connor said, you have a better caliber of athlete playing for the Huskies than the Utah team, than some of the other teams that we've seen USC play. And this is a horrible mismatch in coaching. Peterson's a very good in-game coach, I believe. He's got the home field advantage going on here. He's got a healthy quarterback compared to the Trojans. Honestly, if you want this at 10, I think you need to get it now. I think it's probably higher than that by the time you get a little closer to the game. I like Washington here as well, minus the 10 points. I don't feel bad about laying double digits at home just because of the advantages that I think that the Huskies probably have here. I feel actually pretty good about this pick. So by a 2-1 margin, Dari, you want to go with the flow?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the flow. I like Washington here as well. They're at home. I think they want to prove that they're at the top of the Pac-10. I think this is something that they're actually looking forward to this game to kind of make that statement. And Easton's playing really well. Just like Connor said, last week he was 24 of 28. I think that continues in this week, and he has a really good game against the Trojans.
Great pick there. Let's do Clemson going to North Carolina. Mike Griffith, how about your thoughts on the defending national champion?
Clemson plays North Carolina. It was a fun notion for a minute that maybe somebody in the ACC could challenge Clemson. It's not going to be North Carolina. 45-21, Clemson over the Tar Heels.
All right, so Mike goes the side of UNC at least to cover. He takes them underneath the number here. Connor, something with Clemson this season just hasn't quite seemed right as of yet. Not bad, but just not quite a finely tuned, well-oiled machine. Is the magic run out now for Mac Brown, and is this the week that Clemson really gets fat?
No. You know I love a good home dog.
Yeah.
I took Vanderbilt a week ago against LSU, and it came a lot closer than I think a lot of people thought to, and Vanderbilt sort of covering that game. Clemson, for whatever reason, has sort of been, as you mentioned, sleepwalking through this game. UNC, they might not be the most talented team, but they're going to play you tough. They played Wake tough. They played close games, I think.
And I am firmly convinced, by the way, that Wake Forest is a good team.
Yes.
Wake Forest is just a good team.
There's a good chance if Wake Forest, this isn't a game we're picking, but if Wake Forest beats Boston College this week, they're going to be 8-0 heading into when they go play Clemson later on in the season.
And not to get too deep in the weeds, but Boston College almost lost to Rutgers last week, lost to Kansas the week before.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty good about Wake in that spot.
Yeah. So, having laid all that out there, I think this is a UNC team that, if that wine and cheese crowd comes fired up, ready to go, I think they might be able to, Mac Brown, they got a good coaching staff there. Phil Longo is their offensive coordinator. I think they might be able to tinker and do just enough to keep this game within 4 touchdowns. Give me North Carolina and the home dog here.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers, I say Clemson's been not quite right. It doesn't necessarily scream that to you. They're 6-1 their last 7 against the spread, 5-0 on the road against the spread in their last 5. Been fine against UNC for the most part, 4-1 against the spread in their last 5 against the Tar Heels. However, keep this in mind, 1-4 against the spread in their last 5 trips to Kenan Stadium, which kind of overlaps some of that same time span. Dari, this is one of those things where I don't feel great about this pick. I wouldn't just slam my fist on the table and tell you that I see it this way, but I think being a defending national champion is not an easy thing to do. I think coming back and sort of finding the same level of juice, especially in a game where it'd take 2 miracles stacked on top of each other for North Carolina to ever threaten Clemson. I think it's easy to sleepwalk through this game, and I don't quite think they have the same offensive firepower right now that Alabama does, which prevents Alabama from having to worry too much. I don't feel great about this, but I do like UNC just barely here, plus the 26.5. So that puts, 2 – actually, that's a clean sweep on the side of the Tar Heels, which is – boy, that's setting yourself up for failure. Do you want to go with the flow here on the side of the Tar Heels?
Well, my initial pick on this when I first saw it was Clemson, taking the Tigers at 27 points. And then I've kind of looked into it. Carolina's done pretty well against Clemson, playing at home. They've covered, I think, 5 out of their last 6. But UNC just has so many injuries. They've lost, I think, 3 of their starting offensive linemen. Clemson's strength is their defense. The offense has been in the slump as far as the passing game. They've been able to run on anybody. I want to take UNC in the point, but I think I'm going to go with my initial gun and take Clemson.
Okay.
To cover the 27.
Are you like me that if you could subtract any game from the ledger this week, Clemson UNC might be the one I'd want to take a pass on and not make a pick on? Are you that way? It sounds like you're a little hesitant with your pick. If you could be forced to skip this one or allowed to skip this one, would you choose to?
Yeah, absolutely. This one I'm kind of a tweener on, so I'm not confident either way.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good piece of analysis on this. This is also a sneaky, interesting game. Night game, I believe, in Lincoln, Nebraska for this one. Is game day in Lincoln on Saturday? Okay, so game day now going to 3 touchdowns, almost nearly 3 touchdown spread games. But nonetheless, Nebraska does host Ohio State. 17.5-point favorite are the Buckeyes here after scoring nearly 80 last week against Miami of Ohio. Justin Fields accounted for 6 touchdowns in the second quarter alone. Didn't play in the second half. They are a big favorite on the road here. They covered a big number. They flew past a big number at Indiana 2 weeks ago. Buckeyes and Huskers. Mike Griffith, what do you think?
Ohio State, Nebraska. I know all the Georgia fans will be rooting for Justin Fields to win that one. The Buckeyes beat the Cornhuskers 30-24 in a game much closer than expected when Justin Fields scores the game-winning touchdown in the fourth quarter.
Boy, he likes this one to be a lot closer than I do. 30-24. Ohio State by winning a little less than a touchdown there from Mike Griffith. Connor, I told you this week when I first saw this line, it was actually lower than I thought it would be. I thought Ohio State, just based on the way that it's been riding high, would get a little more love from the books than this. 17.5 seems a little low to me. What do you think?
The line is a little fishy. However, give me Ohio State here. Nebraska's defense has not been good. They blew a big lead to Colorado. They gave up 38 points ago to Illinois. I do think Justin Fields might be struggle against a good defense. This Nebraska team is not it. I do worry about a backdoor cover here because I think Nebraska's offense under Scott Frost is pretty good, and they might be able to engineer some points here and there. But I don't think they're going to be able to stop Notre Dame and Justin Fields here. They're just too athletic. They're just too physical. They're too good at wide receiver. I think they figured out how to run the football again. Give me Ohio State here. And please don't pick them because you and I have been on every single pick so far.
Is that
together,
same one?
We are
I'm telling
7
you,
for 7 in lockstep.
We talk about these games too much during the week. Ohio State 5-2 against the spread in its last 7. They are 4-1 in their last 5 against the spread against Nebraska, and that means a little something to me, just in the basis of the fact that it just goes to show you that Ohio State is typically recruiting better talent than what Nebraska is going to recruit, as a way of being different from Connor. And I can talk myself into this a little bit. I can go the Nebraska side on this one on the virtue of if you score 80 at home one week and they literally score like 76 points and have to go on the road the next week, Lincoln fans are good. This stadium will be loud even though Nebraska's not very good. I think of Scott Frost as a pretty good game day coach, even though I'm not quite sure about his ability to be the architect of a program that wants to compete for real legitimate national championships, not the fake phony ones that UCF passes out. If you want to make a case for Nebraska here, I don't think it's a terrible case. I went against Ohio State the other day, and I was bad wrong against Indiana. But I'm going to be right on one of these eventually. So I can talk myself into Nebraska on this. I'll take the Huskers. Not as close as Mike Griffith says, but closer than the experts think. I'll take Nebraska plus the points here. It's at least fun to watch on a Saturday night. So by a 2-1 margin, that puts the flow on the side of Nebraska. Dari, do you want to go with the flow?
I am not.
Okay.
I'm gonna take the Buckeyes. I think they're trying to run up the score because they want to make that Final Four. They want to get in the playoffs, and they want to stay relevant, racking up points. So I think they're going to try to score as many points as they can. I don't think Nebraska's defense is that good. I do think Nebraska is going to put up 3 or 4 touchdowns in this game. I just expect Ohio State to be 49 and in the 50s.
Yeah, I think that your reasoning on this is a pretty good argument because, listen, I think the Big Ten champion's making the playoff this year, but I know that Ohio State fans feel like they've been left out a couple of times. So from that standpoint, maybe a little extra motivation there. I think that's probably a pretty strong play. Dari, next week we'll get a chance to talk with the Dogs again against Tennessee. Do you have any early feel on kind of what you're thinking here? It's got to be a huge number, right?
Yeah, monstrous. That's going to be a big number, and I think Georgia will probably cover.
Yeah. Tennessee right now may be the East version of Arkansas. One of those teams is so bad that you just have to go against them no matter who they're playing. But we'll look forward to doing that with you next week. Also, I want to remind y'all that if you've got an issue that you're facing at your home, we talk about the air conditioning stuff, whether it be the plumbing, the electric, everything else. The folks at R.S. Andrews, they show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. And that will be good news for you as well. It's the kind of peace of mind that you get from our friends at R.S. Andrews. So make sure you check them out online at rsandrews.com. Dari, thanks so much for being with us. We'll look forward to speaking to you again next week.
Good. Awesome. Bye.
And everybody else, thanks for being with us here as well. Good luck on your picks here this week. Hope you are better at picking winners than at least I was last week. And one way or another, as Connor said, he's kind of in the same boat with me on some of these picks here this week. We shall see if I drag him down this week, or maybe I'll come rising up here a little bit this week. But we'll find that out one way or another. Enjoy the games this weekend. We'll see you next week at this same time for Go With The Flow, presented by RSN.